Good morning. We present Vida Klocke with her second presentation, her second fire on a mountain scene. Thank you, Vida.
Good morning, everyone. This is our second fire on the mountain scene. Hopefully you got to watch the first fire and get the pattern off of the iPad webpage from a PDF form. The colors are listed on there, but I will quickly go through the colors in case you'd forgotten or lost the list. This is the finished piece. This is the one that I started last week. Okay, and it's been fired and it's been sanded and cleaned, ready to go. Now, if you notice down here in the corner, there's a little white spot. I'll tell you what happened. Have you ever had your green paints tend to spit in the kiln? And I had a problem with that, and I had a dark spit mark there. Oh, China paint. I don't use Wink. It's too dangerous. I do use what it's called Armor Etch. It's actually a glass etching cream, and it's in a cream form. And so you can see exactly where you put it. I'll open it up and show you. And I just keep a little wand right on it. It's cream and it's white, and you put it on the spot and let it sit for a few minutes. I just wipe the wand off, put it back on my little bottle, so it's always ready to go. You can get Armor Etch at Hobby Lobby. I'm sure at any craft store you could get this at. Like I said, it's an etching cream, but it's got some of the same acids in it that Wink has. It's just that it stays where you want it. It's a lifesaver when you just have small repairs to do. I use it a lot when I'm doing lusters. It takes lusters off immediately. So you want to keep a warm paper towel handy, wet, and just wipe it away. If you leave it on a long time, of course, it will take the glaze just like Wink will, but wipe it off with a clean, wet paper towel and you're ready to go. So I've got that pock mark I will cover with other China paint here in a little bit. But a good thing to have on hand. I always, though, I wash my hands good afterwards just in case I got some cream on my hands. Let's go through the colors real quick. Okay, yellow brown. Yellow brown number 2 are pecan, Copenhagen gray, black, yellow green, antique or brown green, dark green, lavender, water green, and bronze green. Okay. What I use for my brushes are these blends. They're called Aquaflows, and I use those for my square shaders, and I will show you as we continue on some of the other brushes that I use for the different techniques. So I have sanded and cleaned this. Now I want to start from the back forward. Now we did nothing to the sky last time, so I really need to pump up those colors. And I like to do diagonal for drama and motion. So I'll probably start with my lighter lavender and drag that through a little bit. I'm using a wide brush, so I get that stroke in there. I have to use a little bit more oil when I'm working with these colors, purples and rubies. You need just a little bit more oil. I probably wouldn't want to put these in the same size, so I'm doing one larger, one smaller. Maybe I'll go in with a little water green in here. Get that diagonal stroke going. I'm not worried about my mountains. I'll take care of that later. Now I'm going to go into water green with a little bronze green. Let's attach that a little bit here on the edge. I don't believe in painting around things. It looks too much like color by number. Okay, I've got it laid out. Now I'm not going to use any color, just a clean brush. and softly feather that away by holding my brush on the end, just to soften a few of those brush strokes out. Now, you can use a sponge covered with the silk. For large areas to soften, I like to use the pink sponges. So that's what I'll use on this sky. Lightly pad the brush strokes away. If you do too hard, you pull too much of that color away. I kind of like that motion that's going on there. I just don't want it too striped. If you wanted to use more water green, you could do that instead of lavender. Okay, so now I'm going to work my way down. I might go to a slightly smaller brush. I'm going to pull some of those colors that are on here on down. Because they would be reflected, so that's fine to do that. Now it looks a little light on here. I could always go back and do another fire if when you fired it, you didn't think it was dark enough. It's better to go too light than too dark. So I've got that color pushed down. Now, on the shadow side of some of the mountains, I'm going to start putting in a little of the bronze green, just to break that up and give that a little form. And pull this down. I'll take questions at the end. Hopefully you'll have a few. Now I'm going to pull down to the area that is the fog. I can bring some of that color down. And of course I need to add a little lavender onto those foothills also to push those back a little bit. I hope some of you had a chance to do first fire, or that you will. I don't worry about what's in front of it, because I'll clean that back later. So I'm just lightly cross-hatching and feathering some of those colors in, and pushing that fog area a little darker. Now I might go to even a smaller brush now, a smaller square shader. I'm going to go into the gray with just a tiny bit of black and add a few dark areas to the shadow side of the mountaintops. Now in class, we actually did this in 3 fires. Most people don't probably paint quite as dark as I do, so I can pretty much get in what I need on 2 fires, but it's better to go 3 if you can. I'm going to bring some of those shadows down. I want it a little bit lighter on the sunshine side. Maybe I won't go into any black, just plain gray. Give this a little, punch this up back here just a tiny bit. I hope this is staying in focus as I move around. I know my small screen looks good, but not so sure about the big screen. All right, now I have my containers here of, this is my open painting medium, and this is my soft wipeout, which is orange oil and mineral oil. And then I have my regular brush cleaner or odorless terp, odorless mineral spirits. I'm going to go into the odorless mineral spirits, clean that brush, and pick out a few highlight areas just to bring them forward slightly. So we have different depths on those mountaintops. A little bit of buildup there of the purple, so I'll tease that down a little bit. This is more of a soft wipeout. I'll bring a little bit of highlight back here and there as we go down to the foothills. You can play as much as you want. Now with the chisel end of the wipeout tool, I'm going to grab a few strong highlights at an angle. I'm wiping that point often because if you don't, you're just moving that paint around. Looks a little flat right here too. Maybe I'll put some little points in there and soften that buildup. All right. I could go back and play a little more, but for your sake, we'll just let that go. But you get the general idea here, how you get the different textures. And now we're going into the fog area. So I'm just going to slightly soften that. I'm already almost halfway down again. If you wanted to bring a little highlight back on a few of the foothills, you could do something like that. Wipe out just a little highlight. You could go over this with water green or bronze green in another fire if you wanted to. Okay, with my silk, I'm going to clean back this row of yellow brown trees, get some of that gray and lavender out of there. So the tops, at least, of the trees are clean. I'm looking at this little row of evergreen or trees here. They don't need a lot of detail, none at all really. They're in the background. I would use the smaller of my Deerfoot stippler. And maybe I'll go in with just a little bit of antique green. Tap it towards the bottom. I don't want them to be too bright because they're way back there. I could even put a little yellow brown in them if I wanted to tie them in with the other trees. All right, now let's look at these. I need to go in with a darker value, so I'm going to go pecan, yellow brown number 2, with just the edge of my Deerfoot stippler down at the base. Try to think groupings here, lightest light against darkest dark. I tell my students on second fire, don't cover up any more than 2/3. You want to leave that at least a third of your first fire showing. That's what gives our paintings on porcelain that watercolor effect and keeps your values. Darkest green, I'm going to tap a little anchoring here and there with the stippler. Very, very fine. I always have my paper towel anchored to the right, so I don't even have to look to where I'm wiping my brush. So I guess it's very important to get everything organized so that you're not reaching over for your colors and looking for colors and looking for things. If you have everything right where you're supposed to have them, you save a lot of time. We're working down. These next middle ground here is mostly light green. I'm going to add a little medium or antique green to some of those areas with a hairbrush, also called a comb brush. I have two sizes. I'm going to use my smaller size. And I'm going to flick in just to break some of that area up a little. And I'll cover that little pock. It was very darkest green, so it would have shown up no matter what I would have put over it. So that's why I took it off with the armor etch. That's a good little texture there. Let's do a little bit more. Oop, little dark. Do a little bit more on this side. Break up that meadow a little. Maybe I'll go a little darker under the tree here for shadow. With some black, green, or darkest green. Lightest light against darkest dark will really make that tree pop. Okay, let's look at the water. I need to do a little something here, probably not much. My bronze green fired really bright. I mean, if you like it, that's fine. But I think I may go over it, tame it down with a little water green, or I could tame it down with a little bit of gray too. So I'm pulling water green and gray from the edges of the shoreline, leaving my white in the center because I'm going to take that and put some lavender in there. Bigger brush, horizontal strokes, maybe just a tiny bit of highlight. All right, we're coming down here to the trees. The evergreens will be next. And then we're coming to the waterfall. I would like to clean out with silk over my finger, at least the highlight side of my evergreen. So I want to bring those forward again if I can. And I would spend probably a little more time doing this if I were painting this for myself and firing it, but we'll speed things up here a little for you. I'm going to take my square shader with yellow green. I can't really see it on screen, but it's my brightest, lightest green. I'm going to wash that on my highlight side. Of the trees, highlight side of this side, this tree. Because as we go forward, our colors are getting warmer now. I'll have turn the camera at the end here and answer any of your questions. Now I've got two sides of filberts. They're synthetic also, they're rounded on the ends. I start out with the smaller size at the tops of the trees. Let's start getting in some more medium value green with a little bit of dark green, and let's start pushing darker values up under a few of those branches, a little bit more on the right side as we move down. I might go into straight black green in a few of these areas. A little bit strong. These get a little larger as you get to the bottom. So I'm working on getting that extra value, that darker value up in there. I'm going to check that edge now on that tree with medium green. Let's look at, see if we have, these look kind of all the same. Let's pull one out a little bit. Make it look a little different. Give that a different, interesting outer edge. Here, I guess we can pull a few of those out. So try to think in and out. Check and see if it's got an interesting outer edge. Now I'll do the same here. Medium value, just a touch of dark. I hope I'm not putting you all to sleep here. This part gets a little tedious, but I want to keep this side of that tree lighter because I want the light against the dark. I want the viewer to know. I'm going to switch to the larger filbert now. That this tree is in front of the other tree. Now I can go with straight black green right up against the main tree here. And be sure to check that you have an interesting outer edge there. I'll take that filbert and clean it in solvent here. Very, very dry. I don't want it bleeding. I'm going to hit a few of those highlight areas again. Everybody paints these so differently that you have to decide what technique you like best and go with that. I'm trying to keep the tip of this brush flat so I get a sharp wipeout. But these synthetic brushes, they tend to wear out easily, so you kind of have to ditch them after a while. It's getting a little thick on the end there. You want this tree to appear that it's going over that mountain. All right, I'm going to check my edge now. Okay, maybe I could do something a little more interesting right here. Sometimes if you don't know, hold it up to a mirror, and sometimes it will just jump right out at you what the problem is, or if you have a leaning tree or you need to adjust the shape. This is a little flat right here. Give her a little interest. Now with the wipeout tool, I'm going to find a few of those little trunks that might be hiding in there. With a scroller brush, I'll go in with yellow brown number 2. Well, that's too much there, but so I will fix that by wiping some branches back in it, because less is always better. So cut that off a little and I have a fine wipeout tool. If you wanted to do some fine little branches, you could cut in. I can't really see these very well. I could have done that on first fire, but you could paint them in with a little liner brush too if you wanted to do like a little bit more detail on your main tree. Sometimes they have dead little branches that come off the trunk. If you wanted to add more detail like that, you certainly could. But we're going to move along. We are down just about to the waterfall here, so let's pump that up with, let's do a wash of water green. We have to have something to wipe back to. Now I want more shadows under, so I'm going to go with gray. Remember, we put some bubbles in there last time. I might do just a touch of black in my brush. Now I'm going to continue on with some water here. Water green. And again, the bronze got a little bright. If it's too bright for you, go into a little gray on your brush and calm it down a little bit. Or you could use cool shadow. You see how that calms that water down a little bit. Okay, so I've got my color on the waterfall. Now I need to think about highlights. I'm going with my clean filbert. Let's grab the tops of these now. And then I'll twist the brush a little and do some finer cutouts coming down. Just like anything else, you have to have color on there to have something to wipe back to. I bet you were wondering why I was putting on all that color and covering up that white water on the waterfall. Well, this is why. I've got a pretty strong highlight on the tops. I'm going to go with the chisel end of the wipeout tool and pull down a few that are more on the top, let's say. You don't want them lined up like posts on a fence. So some long, some short, some wider. If you thought you weren't getting enough depth in here, you could always go back and do another fire, no problem. Now I'm going to take this liner, try to get some bubbles back in here I'm cleaning the liner with turp. The more paint I have on here, the more contrast I'm going to get. I'm not getting a lot of contrast, so that means I have to put more gray and black in there. To build up that contrast. I'll use my scroller instead and see if I can get a few little dots of water to open up here a little. Leave a little bit of the brush cleaner there so it can, oh, it's really working there more than I wanted. I'll let it set up a minute and knock some of that down, but I want it to look a little bubbly, like there's some motion going on. Okay, I'll let that calm down a little bit. All right, while that's doing that, let's move on down. Here I'm going with maybe my larger hairbrush, some pecan. I'll pull up a little interest from the bottom. That's where the shadows would be. And maybe a few of these areas I could warm them up a little bit if I thought they looked a little too cool. All right, so I'll take a larger square brush and just knock down a few of those bubbles. I may have to go back in with the rubber end of my wipeout tool a little too. Oh, that's probably a good stopping point. Now I've got water green and bronze green on a few of my on some of this foliage here. So I'm going to clean that back a little bit. I need to give this a little texture behind that rock, medium green. Maybe a little medium green here. I like this corner a little better this way. All right, being I'm in the green, I may as well do a little here. All right, so I could go down to my water. I'm in my foreground already. Again, water green if I want a little gray to tame it down a little. Can do that. A little darker at the shoreline. I can go in with medium green with just a touch of black green for reflected light under these rocks. Don't want to get too dark right away. It anchors them also, gives them a little reflection. Clean that brush a little now and go into some lavender through the middle. And if that's too much for you, you just cut a little off with the corner of your brush and soften those strokes. Clean back my foreground foliage here. I hope you're all still with me and I haven't put you all to sleep. Pecan. Build up some of that shadow here. And be sure to echo it then a little bit on the other side. Now I have longer foliage here. I'll start out with medium green because it's already a light green. Oop, I don't want to get that dark right away. And maybe just a tiny bit of black green right on that edge to anchor that edge. I have to go back and do my rocks yet, so. Okay, the chisel end of the wipeout tool, get some motion going here maybe. The wind's blowing again here today, so this is appropriate. Oop, I want to always go from the bottom up because that's what happens. So if I bring them in this way, it hopefully brings some of your eye back into the picture. Maybe I'll swing a couple that way. You don't want the meadow to appear striped, so go back and blend a few of those colors if you need to. The smaller square shader, let's go back and look at the rocks. I'm going to go into Copenhagen gray, block them in a little bit on the shadow side. I think, well, I don't know if this was a rock, but it's going to be now. Copenhagen gray. I have a few little rocks right here. Maybe I'll go into a touch of black. No, a little bit much. Now, I'll put just a tiny bit of yellow brown on some of the highlight side. Then with my chisel end of the wipeout tool, give it some sharp edges. These were bigger rocks. I would use saran or cling wrap. Oh, I forgot these little ones up here. They need a little light. Now I can check my shoreline with dark green. Put some attachment here. Could cut a small little line of reflected light. And that breaks that up a little bit too. Now this looks very straight here. I'm going to see if I can loosen that edge up a little bit. Either that or bring the rock down a little. I think bringing the rock down is going to work better. There I am. Small hairbrush. Let's see if we can loosen that edge a little bit. Yeah, I like that a little better. Well, I think at this point I would check my edges and fire. Be sure to check your evergreens and make sure you have good ins and outs. And you can always give this another fire. I want to show you the icing too, if you like enameling. Now I'm going to check, I would check my edge like this, or use my silk or my pad and double check, make sure that that's all brought over to the edge, because I might mat this on top of the mat, so I want the paint to go all around the edges. All right, so I'd fire that at 016 and I'd sign it and maybe add another fire if you think you want a little more depth or detail. This is the piece with enameling. I did some on the mountaintops for snow. I highlighted the frost on some of these trees, and then of course I added some to the waterfall, which really makes it pop. I have a piece here that I did not put it on, and I can demonstrate that for you. How are we doing for time? Have we got a couple minutes to do that? Apparently. All right, I keep my
We have
kit.
11 minutes.
Okay. I keep my non-ping kit separately from everything else. Make a little room here. And my non-ping is white non-ping. And so I grind it with glycerin. Glycerin you can get at the drugstore or even Walmart. And that way it stays open. I keep my little kit with my little tile. Everything's right in here. My oil-free palette knife is all here. This is some of the white non-ping that I have saved, and that's what we'll use today. So if you need a little quick little embellishment, it's already mixed up, ready to go. So I will put some of that on the tile. And I'll show you how I do this. The mountains now I'll just do with palette knife. I put a little bit of the snow on the shadow side, not much. Mostly just on the tops. I use this also for scrolling and pretty much everything. I had trouble with base for raised gold popping off after 30 some years of using it for some reason. So the non-ping works better for me, especially for scrolling and that kind of stuff, because there's so many fires on it. Okay, that's about what I would do. Now you can clean up your edges then, or where you went crazy with your chisel, your wipeout tool. Remember, I do this on a separate fire. Just gives it another element of interest, I think. And then the trees, I would go with my stippler if I can find it. I've got to clean it though, really good, because I don't want color in there. And I would just tap the top of my trees just like it was frost from the fog. And just in the highlight part of the this grouping of trees. Then would come back to the waterfall. I want most of it on the top. And then I keep a little brush in my kit too that's oil-free. And if I need to, I can use glycerin. As my medium. So I put a little glycerin right there on my tile. I want some of this to come down. I would spend probably a little more time here on this. I just want to quickly show you. So I did a sharp edge with the palette knife, and then I'm pulling some down with a brush. And then I also have a stylist. That's this. If I want to pull any small ones down. See, the darker you have under your waterfall, the more contrast you're going to have. I will take the stippler and probably hit a couple of these bubbles. All right, well, I think that's about it. I would fire this at probably 017. All right, I will take questions here. I'll switch my camera over. Is everybody still with me, or?
If you would like to unmute yourself and ask Vida a question.
I'm going to stop the video a second and move my camera.
Vida, this is Brenda. Did you say that when you do your non-ping accenting and detailing, you do that on a fired piece, or do you do it on a piece that you have wet paint?
I'm back, I hope. I always do it on a piece that's been fired.
Thank you.
It works better that way. So if you make a mistake, it's easily wiped off. So it works a little better for you.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? I see there's a few chats here. No questions on that? Oh, anyway, could you bring your piece into focus? How bad was it out of focus? Was it
A little.
a little? Yeah, I don't know what the heck was going on this time with this camera, but if you don't do full screen, it helps, I guess.